Merry Christmas once again. Here is my first instalment of the Pickwick Papers, starting at chapter 28. I should explain that Mr. Pickwick has three friends, Mr. Snodgrass, Mr. Winkle and Mr. Tupman, and they form the Pickwick Club, and they go around having lots of adventures of sorts. Okay, but they've been invited to stay at a friend's house. I'll get to this. Chapter 28. A good-humoured Christmas chapter, containing an account of a wedding, and some other sports beside, which, although in their way, even as good customs as marriage itself, are not quite so religiously kept up in these degenerate times. As brisk as bees, if not altogether as light as fairies, they're quite plump, did the four Pickwickians assemble, on the morning of the 22nd day of December, in the year of grace in which these, their faithfully recorded adventures, were undertaken and accomplished. Christmas was close at hand. In all his bluff and hearty honesty, it was a season of hospitality, merriment, and open-heartedness. The old year was preparing, like an ancient philosopher, to call his friends around him, and amidst the sound of feasting and revelry, to pass gently and calmly away. Gay and merry was the time, and right gay and merry were at least four of the numerous hearts that were gladdened by its coming. And numerous indeed are the hearts to which Christmas brings a season of happiness and enjoyment. How many families, whose members have been dispersed and scattered far and wide in the restless struggles of life, are then reunited, and meet once again in that happy state of companionship and mutual goodwill, which is a source of such pure and unalloyed delight, and one so incompatible with the cares and sorrows of the world, that the religious belief of the most civilized nations and the rude traditions of the roughest savages are alike number it among the first joys of a future condition of existence provided for the blessed and happy. How many old recollections and how many dormant sympathies does Christmas time awaken? We write these words now, many miles distant from the spot at which year after year we met on that day, a merry and joyous circle. Many of the hearts that throbbed so gaily then have ceased to beat. Many of the looks that shone so brightly then have ceased to glow. The hands we grasped have grown cold. The eyes we sought have hid their lustre in the grave. And yet the old house, the room, the merry voices and smiling faces, the jest, the laugh, the most minute and trivial circumstances connected with those happy meetings crowd upon our mind at each recurrence of the season as if the last assemblage had been but yesterday. Happy, happy Christmas, that can win us back to the delusions of our childish days, that can recall to the old man the pleasures of his youth, that can transport the sailor and the traveller thousands of miles away back to his own fireside and his quiet home. But we are so taken up and occupied with the good qualities of this Saint Christmas that we are keeping Mr. Pickwick and his friends waiting in the cold on the outside of the Muggleton coach, which they have just attained, well wrapped up in greatcoats, shawls and comforters. The portmanteaus and carpet bags have been stowed away, and Mr. Weller, the servant, and the guard are endeavouring to insinuate into the foreboot a huge codfish, several sizes too large for it, which is snugly packed up in a long brown basket with a layer of straw over the top, and which has been left to the last in order that he may repose in safety on the half-dozen barrels of real native oysters, all the property of Mr. Pickwick, which have been arranged in regular order at the bottom of the receptacle. The interest displayed in Mr. Pickwick's countenance is most intense, as Mr. Weller and the guard try to squeeze the codfish into the boot. First head first, and then tail first, and then top upward, and then bottom upward, and then sideways and long ways, all of which artifices the implacable codfish sturdily resists, until the guard accidentally hits him in the very middle of the basket, whereupon he suddenly disappears into the boot, and with him the head and shoulders of the guard himself, who, not calculating upon so sudden a cessation of the passive resistance of the codfish, experiences a very unexpected shock to the unsmotherable delight of all the porters and the bystanders. Upon this, Mr. Pickwick smiles with great good humour, and, drawing a shilling from his waistcoat pocket, begs the guard, as he picks himself out of the boot, to drink his health in a glass of hot brandy and water, at which the guard smiles too, and Messrs. Snodgrass, Winkle and Tupman all smile in company. The guard and Mr. Weller disappear for 5 minutes, most probably to get the hot brandy and water, for they smell very strongly of it when they return. The coachman mounts to the box. Mr. Weller jumps up behind. The Pickwickians pull their coats around their legs and their shawls over their noses. The helpers pull the horse cloths off. The coachman shouts a cheery, "All right," and away they go. They have rumbled through the streets and jolted over the stones, and at length reached the wide and open country. The wheels skim over the hard and frosty ground, and the horses, bursting into a canter at a smart crack of the whip, step along the road as if the load behind them, coach, passengers, codfish, oyster barrels and all, were but a feather at their heels. They have descended a gentle slope and enter upon a level as compact and dry as a solid block of marble 2 miles long. Another crack of the whip, and on they speed at a smart gallop, the horses tossing their heads and rattling the harness as if in exhilaration at the rapidity of the motion, while the coachman, holding whip and reins in one hand, takes off his hat with the other, and, resting it on his knees, pulls out his handkerchief and wipes his forehead, partly because he has a habit of doing it, and partly because it's as well to show the passengers how cool he is, and what an easy thing it is to drive 4 in hand when you have as much practice as he has. Having done this very leisurely, otherwise the effect would be materially impaired, he replaces his handkerchief, pulls on his hat, adjusts his gloves, squares his elbows, cracks his whip again, and on they speed, more merrily than before. A few small houses, scattered on either side of the road, betoken the entrance to some town or village. The lively notes of the guard's key bugle vibrate in the cold, clear air, and wake up the old gentleman inside, who, carefully letting down the window sash halfway, and standing sentry over the air, takes a short peep out, and then, carefully putting it up again, informs the other inside that they're going to change directly, changing the horses. On which the other inside wakes himself up and determines to postpone his next nap until after the stoppage. Again, the bugle sounds lustily forth, and arouses the cottager's wife and children, who peep out at the house door and watch the coach till it turns the corner, when they once more crouch around the blazing fire and throw on another log of wood against father comes home, while father himself, a full mile off, has just exchanged a friendly nod with the coachman, and turned around to take a good long stare at the vehicle as it whirls away. And now the bugle plays a lively air as the coach rattles through the ill-paved streets of a country town, and the coachman, undoing the buckle which keeps his ribbons together, prepares to throw them off the moment he stops. Mr. Pickwick emerges from his coat collar, looks about him with great curiosity, perceiving which, the coachman informs Mr. Pickwick of the name of the town, and tells him it was market day yesterday, both of which pieces of information Mr. Pickwick retails to his fellow passengers, whereupon they emerge from their coat collars too, and look about them also. Mr. Winkle, who sits at the extreme edge, with one leg dangling in the air, is nearly precipitated into the street as the coach twists around the sharp corner by the cheesemonger's shop and turns into the marketplace, and before Mr. Snodgrass, who sits next to him, has recovered from his alarm, they pull up at the inn yard, where the fresh horses with cloths on are already waiting. The coachman throws down the reins and gets down himself, and the other outside passengers drop down also, except those who have no great confidence in their ability to get up again, and they remain where they are and stamp their feet against the coach to warm them, looking with longing eyes and red noses at the bright fire in the inn bar and the sprigs of holly with red berries which ornament the window. But the guard has delivered at the corn dealer's shop the brown paper packet he took out of the little pouch that hangs over his shoulder by a leathern strap, and has seen the horses carefully put to, and has thrown on the pavement the saddle which was brought from London on the coach roof, and has assisted in the conference between the coachman and the hostler about the grey mare that hurt her off foreleg last Tuesday, and he and Mr. Weller are all right behind, and the coachman is all right in front, and the old gentleman inside, who has kept the window down full 2 inches all this time, has pulled it up again, and the cloths are off, and they are all ready for starting, except the two stout gentlemen, whom the coachman inquires about with some impatience. Hereupon the coachman and the guard and Sam Weller and Mr. Winkle and Mr. Snodgrass and all the hostlers and every one of the idlers, who are more in number than all the others put together, shout for the missing gentlemen as loud as they can bawl. A distant response is heard from the yard, and Mr. Pickwick and Mr. Tupman come running down it, quite out of breath, for they have been having a glass of ale apiece, and Mr. Pickwick's fingers are so cold that he has been full 5 minutes before he could find the sixpence to pay for it. The coachman shouts an admonitory, "Now then, gentlemen." The guard re-echoes it. The old gentleman inside thinks it's a very extraordinary thing that people will get down when they know there isn't time for it. Mr. Pickwick struggles up on one side, Mr. Tupman on the other. Mr. Winkle cries, "All right!" and off they start. Shawls are pulled up, coat collars are readjusted, the pavement ceases, the houses disappear, and they are once again dashing along the open road with the fresh, clear air blowing in their faces and gladdening their very hearts within them. That was part 1. 11 more to go for the 12 Days of Christmas.